good afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you are. I'm doing another live event. Well, I don't know, just a busy day today in the office. And I thought, well, okay. Oh, and I thought, well, let's do another live event and see what happens. So, yeah, lots of people always ask me, Frans, what is your journey about? So I thought maybe I'll talk a little bit about that and why I teach what I teach. So I started actually practicing the system of Reiki a long time ago, about 20 years ago, 21, 22. And I first learned the system of Reiki in Nepal, Kathmandu. Before that, about 6-7 months before that, maybe a bit longer, I was in the Himalaya, and we lived in India for 2 years. And so the first year we were traveling around, and the first part of it, when we arrived from Holland, I was suffering a little bit from my emotional states, not really so good, and also from lower back problems. I've had that since I was 16 or something like that. It's called the Sherman disease, and they had put me into plaster once from here till my hip, all in cast for about 9 weeks or something when I was very young. And so when I was in India, I started to suffer from this back problem again. It hurt, and the traveling was hard, and carrying a backpack was difficult. And so one day, I remember I was laying in bed, and I didn't feel physically so good, emotionally not so good. And I thought, well, I need to heal myself. I need to do something for myself. And so one thing led to another, and a few days later, we were sitting at this healer, a local healer, it's called a Lamu, in Ladakh in the Himalayas, very beautiful. And we were only allowed to watch. There were 5 foreigners, and the rest was all local people. And this lady was going into chanting, doing praying, and it was very dark, and one by one, the local people were called forward, and she was touching them, or talking to them, or doing something to them. And we were just observing. And at the end of it, suddenly she was standing there and said, oh, one of the foreigners needs to come. Some dialect, someone was translating it, and she pointed to me, and off I go, and she I pointed to my back, and she put her hands on me, and then what happened, I don't really know. What happened was that I felt a tremendous amount of heat from the tips of my toes to my crown, completely engulfing my body. I started to cry, and if you've told me it was 2 seconds or 2 days or 2 weeks, I would have believed you either way. And then when I sat back and I go, what the hell just happened? And the next morning, I wanted to buy books on spirituality, meditation, Buddhism, Hinduism, yoga, Qigong, whatever I could get my hands on, what was quite unusual for me. I was a big party person. And so, yay. And so that's really where my journey started. And if I look back now, she really, in that moment of time, she was showing me my true self, and what was quite tremendous. And it was, the trigger of my spiritual journey. And one of the books I bought later on was a Reiki book. And I remember sitting there on the bed looking at these pictures of hand positions, trying to do it. Oh, this is quite nice. And so then we came across a Reiki teacher in Kathmandu one day, and we did Reiki 1, 2, and 3 while we lived there. And he was a bit of a hippie. It was a very modern style of teaching, but that didn't matter. And what was very interesting, the day after we finished the Reiki 3 class to become Reiki teachers, we didn't know anything. And what was okay, because the teaching was a bit nothing. But anyway, we were walking in the streets of Kathmandu. We were standing in front of this bookshop. It's called, if I remember correctly, Pelgrim's bookshop, very famous in Kathmandu. Has a cafe, and we were just standing in front of it with lots of other foreigners walking by. And this couple comes up to us and said, excuse me, do you know any Reiki teachers around who can teach us Reiki 1? Bizarre, of course. And we said, well, we just learned it, but we don't know anything. Maybe have a look at the notice board inside Pelgrims. And so they went outside, and we said, wow, this is this is funny, this is interesting. How is this possible? So they became our first students, and I remember sitting on a bed in a hotel explaining it to them. About a week later, in that week, we wrote our first manuals, etc., and created certificates. And then the next day, or after we've done this teaching with this couple, we moved to Darjeeling, and we lived there for a year in India, where the tea plantations are. Beautiful area. And we started to do treatments on the local community in the tea plantations. We were asked to come there, and we had no idea what people had. And I remember we were doing treatments on all people with open wounds, who were coughing, who were dying, who had eye operations, or these eye camps, you know, where they do like 50 eye operations a day. And, you know, some foreigners were traveling around, and we had a sign out, the International House of Reiki, and so they would come along, maybe for a Reiki treatment or for a class, and then they would say, oh yeah, but you know, I've done Reiki, how do you protect yourself? And I go, oh, what are you talking about? Oh, I don't protect myself, I just do what I do out of love and compassion and kindness. And so then some people like this question, that question, and for me it really triggered, how was it practiced in Japan? And one of the other interesting things was too that around Darjeeling there's lots of healers, Nepali healers, Tibetan healers, Hindu healers, Buddhist healers, Tibetan healers, Hindu healer, you name it. You know, it was quite interesting. And if we talk to those healers, they all had one thing in common, and it was their own daily meditation practice in whichever way. And I thought, wow, I've never been taught that in the system of Reiki. So I started to meditate on the symbols and mantras just by myself. And it also triggered that, yeah, how and where and what happened with the system of Reiki in Japan. And at that time when I started to really internalize and living in Darjeeling, these symbols and mantras and do my meditation practice, I started to have these really strange dreams. And I would wake up in the middle of the night and feel this energy buzzing through my body going, and then I go, what the hell just happened? And so after these dreams kept reoccurring, I went to a friend who was in a retreat there who we met. He was practicing Tibetan Buddhism, and he was studying with a yogi there. And I said, oh, you know, Ray, can I talk to you? And explained what these dreams were. And he said, what are you practicing? So, well, I don't know, Reiki. He said, you know, these are really Buddhist dreams. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, these are exactly the dreams my teacher looks for, you know, to see if you're applying the system correctly. And I go, I don't know where it's coming from. So then that triggered more investigation. Where is the system of Reiki really coming from? And so we went, after about living a year in Darjeeling, went back to Australia, to Sydney. I started to investigate. So I did lots of different trainings with different people in more modern systems of Reiki. And at that time, 1999, 2000, 2001, there was a group of people over the world, a very small group, who were doing a lot of research. And that also came into being because Hiroshi Doi in 1999, Japanese Reiki teacher, was the first time to go to Vancouver and show more Japanese teachings in the system of Reiki. So then in 2001, we went to Japan for the first time and met up with a few Japanese Reiki teachers. One of them was a Gakkai member in Tokyo. And it was really interesting. So we spoke about the system of Reiki, a modern way, Japanese way. Then we met up with Mrs. Yamaguchi, who practiced Jikuden. And we started to do Komyo Reiki with Yakutin Yumoto. Then later on, we trained with Hiroshi Doi in Japan of Gendai Reiki Ho. And so really investigating. Then also in 2001, I started training with Chris Marsh in the UK. And yeah, that really triggered a lot. And so over the years, my desire really was to started to train with priests in Japan. Because even that I trained with all these different people, I still felt there was something missing. there was something vitally missing, and I couldn't put my finger on. Even that they were pointing towards Satori, Ansin Ritsume, that inner enlightenment, focusing on yourself. A lot of the tools were so externalized, and it wasn't really doing it for me. So little bits were, a little bit, why is that? Where's it coming from? How does it apply? So I knew a Tendai priest, and so I contacted this Tendai priest, and I said, look, I really need to study with these priests in Japan. And he said, okay, I've known you now for 10 years, and I know you're a good guy, I know you're serious, you want to really practice, so I'll get you in contact with this priest. He said, but be aware, he's a little bit eccentric. Indeed he is. So he wrote an introduction to this priest, and I didn't hear anything back for a while. And so I contacted my friend again. I said, hey, he's not replying. He said, yeah, he's often in the mountains practicing, just, have some patience, which I didn't have. Sometimes, not always. So I contacted the priest again, and then he wrote back to me, and he said, okay, I'll contact you next week. And a week later, he contacted me, and he wrote all these Reiki questions. And I thought, oh man, I'm in so much trouble. What do you think Mikosu is about? What do you think the system of Reiki is about? What do you think about Honsei Shinen? What do you think about Daikomyo? All of these questions. And I think, man, who is this guy? So anyway, I wrote back to him. And then I didn't hear anything from him again. And he said, okay, then finally he replied, it's okay, I think you can come to Japan. And so that was the first time I went to train with him. And that was for a week. And we spent from like early morning to late at night training. And what was really interesting, about the second day I was there in Japan with him in his monastery, small little monastery. There was him as the priester, and there was also a priestess. Really beautiful, amazingly powerful. I mean, they train you, we listen, we sit, but they're really dedicated. They're really strict in a way, and yet very open and joyful. And so on the third day, he said, Frans, I had a bit of a difficulty with you. He said, because you were introduced to me by this priest, this other priest. And, I trust him that he's picking the right person. He said, but then I did a Reiki class in Japan. And he said, that to me didn't gel at all. He said, what they were teaching there didn't gel with what I know. And what is okay, I'm not saying this is good or this is bad. I'm just telling you the story. And we all are attracted to different kind of teachings, no matter what it is. So anyway, and he said, so that's why I sent you this list of questions. He said, but I really like your answers. So if you would answer to like this teacher I visited and did Reiki 1 and 2 with in Japan, then I would not have invited you. So I was glad I answered the questions the way I answered them. And I started to train with him. And then when I went home, I kept practicing, kept delving deeper. And I really thought, oh yeah, this makes sense. We stayed in contact. And then again, I went to train in Japan the next time with 2 different priests. Once with him, one with another one. Both are Shigendo priests, and the other one is also Shingon and Tendai. So really interesting because he can really show the differences. He also practices Shintoism and teaches elements of Shintoism. And the second time was even more interesting because, particularly with the first, with both priests, but particularly the first priest, he said, well, okay, Frans, you come again. Last time you came on your terms. We were just, starting to learn each other, who we are, what we do. And this time, you come on my terms. So, be warned. And it was tough, man. We started at like 4 or 5 in the morning till 11 o'clock at night. And he lives about half an hour from an onsen, a Japanese hot spring, open 24 hours a day. And he liked to go there at 12 o'clock at night. So then we would go there at 12 o'clock at night, sit in the onsen for a couple of hours, and then go back and then start again at 4 o'clock. And it was really intense. And, you know, they do these really wonderful teachings. I was vegetarian at that time, and I don't really like these labels of vegetarian or vegan or meat eater or pescatarian or whatever. So anyway, and on the third night in the training, he serves me all this raw fish, and he knew, you know, and so I'm eating away, and then after the meal, he explained to me why he was serving raw fish. Did I get angry? Did I get worried? Was I grateful that he served food or not serving food? Was I being true to my way, my being? Was I being compassionate, etc.? And even that teaching of just serving that fish while I was vegetarian for 20 years, right? I didn't have fish or meat, really had a huge ramification, because it made me realize how often we stick ourselves into boxes. I'm vegan, I'm vegetarian, I can't do this. I am this or I'm that. I'm a teacher, I'm not a teacher, I'm a student, I'm not a teacher. You know, all of these things, we stick ourselves so very tied in these boxes. And then we label ourselves also. You know, this is I think also where we have so much issues. And I know why we do it is because this is how we identify ourselves. And the identification is really in the I, in the ego. I am a vegetarian. I'm a vegan. I'm a meat eater. I am a teacher. I am a student. I am this. But it's all about the ego. So the more I realized that, just from this one little teaching, we did heaps more very powerful training. Lots of other ramification came about. And so I did a week and a half with him, and then I had a free day, and then I did a week and a half with another priest. So the first week and a half was in a monastery, and then the next week and a half was actually in the mountains. A lot of the Shugendo practitioners, Shugenya as a practitioner, they go into the mountains. And I went to Mount Omine, a beautiful mountain. The practices there started 1,300 years ago. There's no infrastructure. You have to walk up to the mountains. You can't stay there as a tourist. You can only stay there if you belong to the Buddhist groups who have little temples there. And then you do practices there. Some very simple. You go into a cave and you do some chanting. Some really challenging. They hang you over a cliff. You have to hold your hands like this, and then they lower you over a cliff head first, and they hold you by the ankles, and the cliff is really all the way steep, or you have to climb these sheer rock faces. You just follow the teacher, and the teacher says, okay, Frans, you have to put your foot there, then your hand there, then this, and off they go. And so it's all about being focused, not afraid, no anger, no worry, being really grateful. You have to sign a piece of paper that you do that voluntarily. The first evening we arrived in this mountaintop, they were discussing some things, and I said, oh, is it okay? And they looked a bit worried. I said, well, last year a couple of people died here during these practices. And I go, okay, and now if you can sign this, please. And I go, well. But again, it was just really powerful to sit on this mountaintop and practice, you know, and really internalize it. So I think I'm one of the rare Reiki teachers out there who does this training with these Japanese priests on mountaintops in temples. And that for me has really deepened my own understanding of the system of Reiki. You know, they're pointing out, for example, the precepts, you know, how that relate to Japanese spiritual teachings, hands-on healing, very common in Mikusui's time with the priests and priestesses for people who come healing, Reiju, where that comes from and how that traditionally emerged, the symbols and mantras. It's just fascinating. And if we can see the heritage where it comes from, then of course our teachings become juicier. You know, we start to tap into the roots of the system of Reiki. And it doesn't mean that we know exactly how Mikusui practice. This will be impossible, you know, because for me also, it is said that Mikasui taught his students according to their spiritual progress. So some he might have only taught hands-on healing, some he taught a very deep spiritual practice, and everything in between. So therefore, we can already see that, for example, Hayashi focused very much on the hands-on healing part of it. And one is not good or bad, it's just the way it is. And some people gravitate more towards hands-on healing, some people gravitate more towards a very direct spiritual experience of their true self, of Reiki, of their inner great bright light. And we have to see and feel where that leads us and what is happening. So yeah, for me, those trainings are just really, really important. I'm still practicing these teachings at home, and this year I'm going to Japan again. Oliver Drew is a German friend of mine. We take a little group to Japan. What will be very exciting. And for me, it's so important that we really, as practitioners, try to do our best as much as possible. It's like playing a music instrument. We can pick it up once in a while and go, play the violin. But actually, we need to train once a day, like really training so that we can really understand the violin, the music. Is not, and also, for me also sometimes, and again, it's nothing wrong with it. I still do it sometimes. I go to bed, I'm tired, do some hands-on healing, and I'll fall asleep. But if we say the next morning, I did some great hands-on healing sessions, that is not really true because we were sleeping, right? And so this is also, we have to be really honest to ourselves. What are we doing? If I'm going like this and I fall asleep, I'm not really doing hands-on healing. Hands-on healing traditionally in Japan was done sitting, wide awake, really focused, not thinking about past, present, future. And that is really where the energy became free and came free for that self-healing to happen. If we sleep, we sleep. If we drink tea, we have to focus on drinking tea. So this is a really important element also in the training. And so this is also why we call, in the International House of Reiki teachings, we call it Usui Reiki Regio. We haven't trademarked the name, we haven't changed the name to Fransi Reiki or Papa Smurf Reiki. That's why I'm wearing some blue things. Because for me, when we do that, we stick the teachings, again, in a too narrow box. Spirituality, we can't trademark it, we can't put a stamp on it, The teacher really is there to pull out and to help you to lay bare your inner great bright light, right? And not to put my stamp of my great bright light on you. That doesn't work. I need to help you to facilitate your pure experience, not impose my pure experience on you. And therefore, for me also, the teachings are very flexible. Because the deeper you go, the more you will find your pure experience, then certain teachings are going to change. So yes, we have a kind of a certain practice what we teach in our Reiki 1, 2, and 3 classes, but then you can join the retreat, so we do one-on-one training, and then we really tailor-make teachings towards you, because each person is so different. And for me, that is a really important element in teaching. And if we teach the system of Reiki as a spiritual practice, if we just do it as hands-on healing, okay, it's not, no worry. But if we see it as a real spiritual practice, it has to become individualized. And we cannot stick it in a narrow box, right? Actually, it has to be wide open, because spirituality means spiritual freedom, being wide open, being really free, not being dogmatic by rules and regulations and boxes. Then we only become more like this. And, sometimes we can see this when we talk to people in lots of different traditions, when the teachings have become too restricted, their whole actions and their whole way of being is becoming too restricting. And therefore, you can ask yourself, am I becoming more free? Am I becoming more free that I can encompass everybody? This is the most important element of seeing the system of Reiki as a spiritual teachings. Anyway, so that was it for today. I'm going to drink another something. I'm not sure what, tea, coffee, lemonade, whatever it is. I hope you all have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, and talk to you later. Bye.